Billionaire Gautam Adani has lost more than $100 billion in value ever since the Hindenburg report hit him and his business empire. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo Story. Our focus today continues to be on this dramatic cracks that have emerged in the Adani empire ever since a report from the Hindenburg Research Institute alleged fraud and market manipulation. A shock announcement on the day of the budget from the Adani Group said that a 20,000 crore FPO or follow on public offer was being scrapped, even though it was fully subscribed. But it was fully subscribed not by retail investors, but by, it is rumored and speculated, big conglomerates in India as well as an organization, an institution out of the UAE. The debate has now got bitter and it's got political. The opposition has taken this issue to Parliament. It's asking for a JPC, a Joint Parliamentary Committee, or a Supreme Court monitored probe. It's also asking questions about why LIC has been exposed in the Adani empire. Remember, LIC has a purchase equity value of a little over 30,000 crores, as LIC clarified today. There are others, including the Adani Group, who have described the Hindenburg report as an attack on India. There are those who believe that the Hindenburg Institute, being a short seller, actually has profit to make, and there could be other skullduggery and shadow boxing at work. Either way, it's an enormous crisis for the Adani empire, and Gautam Adani took the unprecedented step today of coming on camera himself, explaining why he killed a fully subscribed FPO. Making sense of both the politics and the economics of this, let's introduce our very distinguished panel on the program today. Joining us up front first is Basant Maheshwari. Basant Maheshwari is an investor and author. He's been doing a series of videos on the Adani crisis on his own YouTube channel, and millions are actually watching those videos, so do check them out. Joining us today from the United States of America is Asha Jadeja Motwani, who's a venture capitalist. She's been making the argument that these are activist institutions and organizations that are trying to pull down the Indian stock market. We'll ask her why she thinks so and whether that absolves the Adani empire of answering on the allegations of fraud. Also joining us today is Ashwini Mahajan. Ashwini Mahajan is, of course, the leader of the Swadeshi Jagran Manch. His focus has always been on economic issues, and sometimes he's disagreed with the government that he supports. Otherwise, he's a very sort of puritanical, some would say, about his economic principles. Also joining us on the program today is Salman. He's a trained economist. He's also, of course, a Congress leader and an author. It's good to see you, Salman, on a day when the Congress has led the opposition in demanding a JPC in Parliament. And finally, Sanjay Hegde, who's of course a senior advocate, one of our best known lawyers, is joining us as well. Thank you very much, all of you. And I think I must start the ball rolling by allowing Gautam Adani to speak in his own words. But hang on, let me get initial comments from all of you. Let me start with Asha, because she has a very provocative view. And that view is that this is some conspiracy of some kind. Asha, the allegations are serious. It's also serious that the 20,000 crore FPO had no retail investors. It has been salvaged, it is rumored, by big business conglomerates, including an institution out of Abu Dhabi. So why are you sort of skeptical about these allegations? Asha Jadeja Motwani, let's start with you.
So first of all, remember that all these short sellers they benefit hugely. So short sellers like Hindenburg, they benefit hugely when a stock price falls. I've actually been part of the covered call strategy myself in some of my own investments, where let's say if the stock price of, let's say if I was an investor in Facebook, right, and Meta shares drop, I actually get to gain serious profits in that short selling, where I sell the stock and then I buy it back at a huge profit. So number one, Hindenburg is doing a wrong thing by saying this, because it is a short seller. By definition, they are going to profit, number one. Number two, about conspiracy, I don't think it's as big a conspiracy as the BBC documentary, but I do think that there is a sort of I won't call the word cabal, but there is a group that's developing, especially in New York, where there is there are meetings. I've attended some of them, And I remember there was somebody who came from BJP, and they created such hell. We have constant flow of Indian, journalists and writers, and a lot of people who are coming from India meeting with this cabal. They do interact quite a bit with people like Rana Ayub from Washington Post. It's a big group that is coming together in New York City. Now, the fact that its immediate response in India is from the Congress about saying let's do a JPC tells me that there is a group that's forming both within India and outside India, which doesn't seem to like
Okay.
Modi and Modi's heroes, or Modi's, sort of whatever his favorite people. So there is an issue there. Again, I'm not saying that there's a conspiracy, but I do think that there is something developing there which is more than meets the eye.
Okay, hang on, Asha. BBC documentary is a debate for another time, so I'm not going to get into it because it'll completely derail our conversation. But I'm saying even if there is an ideological cabal against the Prime Minister, right? A political cabal against the Prime Minister, how does that change the fact that Mr. Adani is facing a crisis? His stocks are tumbling. He's lost more than $100 billion in value. Mutual funds have not invested in his group. There are questions about his company and his group being highly leveraged. These are real questions, irrespective of politics, right? Would you grant that?
In a big conglomerate like the Adani group, it is absolutely crucial as they grow global. It is absolutely crucial that they have multiple operations offshore, onshore, and they have to use all kinds of financial instruments for their financial efficiency. Now, a group such as this, which is huge, doesn't have anybody but the top five auditors who are working with them. They cannot, in hell, even if they wanted to, they cannot play around or fool around with their numbers or fudge anything just because they are a big
Okay.
group or because they have
Okay.
support of the prime minister. They cannot. They have to
Okay.
be. Yeah. Sorry. Thank you.
No, no, just I wanted to pick up on your last point. The support of the Prime Minister is what the Congress and the political opposition has alleged. So that's my cue to go to Salman Soz, who's an economist but also a congressman. And Mr. Soz, that is my question to you. The opposition, instead of focusing on Gautam Adani, is focusing on the Prime Minister. That is what will give Asha the sort of context to say, listen, this is politics. This is actually all politics. There is a kind of shadow boxing going on. The target is the PM, not Gautam Adani. Kahin pe nigahein, kahin pe nishana. What would you say to that, Salman?
Well, Barkha, first, thanks for having me. I think, frankly, it's ridiculous to suggest that the Congress, which is obviously in the last several years been weakened, politically, it would have so much power that it would somehow get some obscure, some short seller analyst from the US to come up with a report that, by the way, whose contents are already in the public domain in India. What Hindenburg has done is basically put together a story, possibly because they want to profit from this, but basically put together a story and caught the imagination of capital markets in India and abroad. And mind you, if we start seeing conspiracy everywhere, we may miss the big picture. And what is the big picture? This crisis could become much broader than just Adani. Now, remember in 2007, when Lehman Brothers basically started crashing, its market capitalization at that time was a record $60 billion. $60 billion in 2007 February. By 2008, we had the global financial crisis. By 2016, the United States economy had lost $4.6 trillion. Now, Gautam Adani's companies have lost collectively a market capitalization of $100 billion. Imagine how big a number that is. Now, I hope the government and the regulators step in to stem further losses for the broader economy, because this is not going to stay only with Mr. Adani. As far as the Prime Minister's link to Mr. Adani are concerned, they're very well known, and we've been talking about the dangers of crony capitalism. If this thing starts spreading, then many innocent investors, millions of innocent investors, and by the way, people who invest in LIC, State Bank of India, a lot of these people, innocent, will suffer.
Yeah.
So I hope we see
Can
the
I,
big
can I
picture.
ask you? Can I ask you something? Can I ask you something before I go to Ashwini Mahajan? And my question is this: crony capitalism is a legitimate sort of issue to flag, but literally through every government in our country, and sorry to be a cynic, we've had instances of crony capitalism. We've had instances of business houses being closed to government. We've had political patronage. From every government that you can think of, including yours. Right? This crony capitalism debate comes from the fact that there's too much government in business. That nobody wants to address. That get government out of business.
Well, who's going to address this when you have a conglomerate that's been that's seen 800% increase in its value in the last 3 years? 3 years. And by the way, a government that shamelessly indulges in corruption through opaque electoral bonds. Basically, the government gets money from corporates. Nobody knows who these corporates are except for the government, mind you. The government knows. And then you expect good things out of this? You cannot expect good things out of this. The country is going to suffer because of these kinds of linkages. I agree, there have been connections between the private sector and governments throughout history, but nothing at this scale, nothing so blatant.
Okay.
And I think this is going to cause India huge damage if we don't watch out.
Ashwini Mahajan, as the leader of the Swadeshi Jagran Manch, I know that India first is what your economics is centered on. But how is it India first to actually not counter such serious allegations of fraud, of market manipulation, questions around LIC? Thankfully, there are no small investors because there are no mutual fund debt that's been, taken by the Adani group. But there could have been in another context. So, Ashwini ji, how do you see this debate?
You see, we have to look at who is making allegations. I agree with Asha ji that it is Hindenburg which is making these acquisitions. And these acquisitions are actually with a conflict of interest. The conflict of interest is very, very simple, and it is not hidden. That they are going to gain by defaming the Adani group, and therefore they did it. Leave apart the politics of it. Look at how this Hindenburg is being seen in US itself. In US, the stock regulators, they have put restrictions that you can't publish reports about US companies. Asha will agree with this. They lost a case here in India when they started publishing reports on Twitter. A small court, 30,000 court, restricted them. Look, you can't do it. Google was asked to take down whatever was there by Hindenburg. So this is the history of Hindenburg. This is the.
But Ashwini ji, sorry, okay.
Let me complete.
Okay.
So, given this history with the conflict of interest, so how can we really accept or that whatever they are saying is truth? Second, this is the first point.
Okay.
Second is that all these people in the markets, those who are trying to say something or the other, and even the political parties, those who are anti Modi, have they talked about how the investors have lost because of the cash burning by these e-commerce companies? All those who have you know about Paytm, you know about Zomato, you know about Nykaa, how the people have lost money. Have you talked about it? No. Nobody was talking about it because it was a cash burning model. And this Adani group, they are not burning cash. They are building assets. They are building airports. They are building the capacity to produce solar panels. They are producing and semiconductors. So what I'm saying is, all these business is not of burning cash. You don't. I'm not
But
talking about.
why do you think mutual funds have not invested in the Adani group? Why do you think?
This is now that when the market is like that, when the Adani group shares are falling for whatever reason, why should mutual funds will burn their fingers? So that's the
Okay.
point. So now the issue is that you cannot really rely on such kinds of reports with
So,
conflict of interest with those by those people, those who are restricted in their
so
own country.
So I don't know if you've seen this article, but there's an article that was sent to me, and I'll go to Basant Maheshwari and then to Sanjay Hegde, that says 3/4 of the calls by Hindenburg in the past have led to a stock crash. So, you know, it's important to remember that this is not Hindenburg versus Adani. Hindenburg has done this with others. Of course, it's a short seller. It doesn't pretend to be anything else. It's going to make a profit every time it shorts a stock. That's very important to understand. But Basant ji, if I can bring you in now, I think a lot of people who are not from the financial markets, who are not from the corporate world, they don't understand. They don't understand how a man as rich, as powerful as Gautam Adani can suddenly lose $100 billion just like that with one research institute. What's actually going on? Are there structural issues with how Mr. Adani's empire is highly leveraged? Is that something we need to talk about, Hindenburg or no Hindenburg?
Barkha, the thing is, the market, my market, the stock market values everything on perception. You might look at cash flows, you might look at DCF, you might say this company is going to make profits, it's got entry barriers. All that jargon is for the long term, and like Keynes said, in the long term, we are all dead. But for the moment, for the perception part of it, I think everything. How on earth could you explain a company, a great company, the world's foremost EV maker, Tesla, falling from $400 to $100 and from 100 back to 190? It's mostly perception. And Hindenburg could be one of the smartest guys around, but basically we can talk about the way in which they've taken out the report. They've taken a short position, but broadly the structural issue with the Adani empire was it was a little over leveraged for all that it did. And I can't blame Adani for that, because when you grow, when you're small, you need leverage to grow fast. If you want to grow fast, you have to take money, you have to borrow money, and you keep moving fast and faster. If you remember, in 2008, Anil Ambani with his R power was on the same bracket. Like, he wanted to move a little fast. The R power issue didn't do well. He had 4, 5, 6 lined up, and he was on leverage, and the Lehman collapse happened and the world fell. And then Anil Ambani was just wiped off. So, the problem is, the sooner Mr. Adani figures a way out to get out of the leverage, the better for him. If he cannot figure a way out to get out of the leverage, these problems will come today, tomorrow, day after, Hindenburg or no Hindenburg. Now, if I may just extend my argument a bit and tell you, when you take money and you buy a Bombay airport, the Bombay airport is going to pay you over the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. If you put up a Adani green plant, the cash flow will come to you after 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. But the debt has to be serviced. So that's the biggest problem. All the projects that Mr. Adani is in, they are a little long gestation and a deferred cash flow type project. So there's an asset liability mismatch, which we normally say in terms of banks, because when a bank borrows and then it lends. So I think this was a perfect case for somebody to just exploit and explore, and that's what those guys did. So I think the bigger issue right now, just one more line, is, does it extend it to my bank, to my State Bank of India, to my institutions? That's what the government has to see and support and do. But the stock market is in no one's hand. It will do what it feels like doing.
So the market has its own logic, it has its own rules. I think that's very well said by Basant. Sanjay Hegde, what's at stake here? I think, when this Hindenburg report came, a lot of people, they won't say it on camera, but they would say in whispers, Gautam Adani is too big to fail. Right? That is what has constantly been said about Mr. Adani. Then there are other whispers. Who were the business houses that saved him? Why did they come up with money for a follow-on public offer? We still don't actually really have the full information on this. It's all speculative. Now you have the opposition sitting there and saying JPC. Now, some of us are old enough to remember JPCs and how they go. It's actually just something that goes into cold storage. What, according to you, are some of the legal issues at play here that need to be addressed immediately? Sanjay.
There will be several legal issues, starting from fraud, starting from recoveries of money and whatnot. The thing has just begun to unravel. I'm referring to another very similar incident which happened to another industrialist barely in 2019. There was the new medical center in Abu Dhabi. Somebody mentioned Abu Dhabi just before the show. The man owned Western Union. There was a short seller attack by a group called Muddy Waters. And the initial reaction from NMC was that everything is fine. They after all, have owned several things in Burj Khalifa. They were the biggest people around. The attack said it appears principally unfounded, despite the shares tumbling. The company will review the assertions, insinuations, accusations made in the report, which appear unfounded, baseless, misleading, and will respond in detail. In fact, almost we've seen that same playbook being played by Adani. Today, if you go and Google where NMC is, where Mr. B.R. Shetty is, you will see the same kind of Anil Ambani situation which Mr. Maheshwari spoke about. There will be several legal questions. I would not like to make a forecast. The only forecast I'd like to make is that you can bet that the law firms that Mr. Adani employs are busy retaining senior counsel all over the place.
Have they retained you?
I'm not saying anything.
No, I just was being cheeky. Okay, let's come back. The issues are actually serious, right? The issues are very, very serious. And Salman, I want you to tell me honestly that you aren't stunned by the fact that a report where the institute stands to gain a profit can bringing down an empire like this. It will lead to fevered speculation. Bhai, kuch aur hai. I'm not saying that takes away from the Adani empire's need to ask the tough questions, but I think for those of us who are, hardened by cynicism, there's this sense that kuch aur bhi hai. How do you address that?
I don't know what kuch aur bhi hai means really.
Corporate rivalry, political rivalry. It's obvious.
I can only say, as far as the Congress party is concerned, I mean, I'm stunned that this happened and the speed with which this is unraveling. So, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. I think you got a call in the middle, but we can hear you. Go ahead. Yeah.
So the speed at which this unraveled and is unraveling, and we don't know where this is going to end up, because the markets are the markets. Nobody can control the markets that way. But I do think the Hindenburg report exposes things that we in India know about. There are corporate governance issues in the way our companies function, and as our companies start getting more globalized, as they interact with capital markets outside, there will be scrutiny. We should not be shocked by that. What we should be focusing on is how we are regulating our companies. I'm sorry to say that I don't think, I have great confidence in the way our corporate sector is regulated. I think that is a huge problem. That is an ongoing problem. And that is if the government of India and our regulators do not quickly step in to actually assure the markets, especially global capital markets, that we are going to take care of these kinds of situations, then this is going to become a much bigger problem. And people can blame Congress. People can say it's a Congress conspiracy. People can say it's some other corporate's conspiracy. Whatever it is, that is not going to help solve the problem. So if you want to protect the broader economy, the government of India and our regulators need to reassure the market.
I see Sanjay's hand go up, and then I'll go to Basant. Can we unmute Sanjay? Yeah, Sanjay, go ahead. Yeah.
Barkha, another instance that you must remember during the Congress time was Satyam. Satyam fell from 400 to some 4 rupees or something. It had Arthur Anderson as its auditors. So the brand name of the auditors does not matter. What matters is the government response. Satyam was then taken over into Tech Mahindra. So what does the government do if this thing goes out of control? That's the real question.
That's a very important question. Before I come back to Asha and Ashwini ji, Basant, if you had to sort of zero in on one issue of corporate governance that the Adani group must address, Hindenburg or no Hindenburg, what would that be?
See, Barkha, corporate governance is almost the same everywhere: blue, dark blue, gray, black. So I wouldn't like to comment on that. You can choose the color you want. But I think the real issue at Adani is the debt. If they get rid of the debt, I think they're going to survive, they're going to do well. If they don't get rid of the debt, and that's the problem you face in such situations where, I mean, I'm no one to advise, but if they can just go and send a WhatsApp message to 2, 3 people in India that I want to get rid of Gujarat Ambuja Cement, I think that's going to be 50% of the problem solved. And Satyam is very different from these businesses. Satyam was a business where he could generate revenues from the first month, from the first week, or the first year. But in these businesses, they're long gestation period businesses. There's a lot of investments that have gone through. So I think that's the problem they have right now. The problem is real. The real problem is debt. The real problem, the corporate governance obviously comes over, and there we might have different views and you might have different research reports. But I don't see any reason how they can get rid of the debt very quickly at this stage, because once you're in a problem, it becomes very difficult to deleverage.
Okay, I just want to bring in Ashwini ji here. Ashwini ji, the problem with getting rid of debt, I guess the FPO had hoped to, offload 20,000 crores worth of shares, but no retail investor showed interest in that. And as Basant Maheshwari says, perception is everything in the markets, as you would know, being a trained financial voice. What do you think the government's role is at a time like this? And what about the LIC question?
You see, as Basantji has also said, that the problem is of the debt. Obviously, when you are going into such kind of long gestation projects, the debt has to be created, and without debt, you can't take up these businesses. Like if you are building, say, what do you think those who built Delhi airport, they were without debt? They were with that. Everywhere. Like if you are, we have been thinking of putting a plant of for solar panels. That requires money, that requires debt. So debt is always there, and long gestation period, as is rightly said, it is there. But I want to come here with a bigger question. You see, there are thousands of people, those who left the country with their money. And they believe that this nothing can happen in this country, and we must go out. So what has happened? So they are all gone. There are a few people, those who believe in India's growth story, those who are building assets, those who are putting all their efforts in creating those assets which are very much required. Solar panels. Do you want our country to remain dependent on China for solar? Do you want our country to be dependent on for semiconductors? So therefore, what I'm saying is, it is the duty of the government also, and government has been doing very right by promoting such kind of assets creation. So we need the government support, and I would recommend that in case of any such mishap, because of the Hindenburg, because of their conflict of interest, they must be restricted. Our Indian court has restricted. In US, their regulators have restricted. What stops us to restrict such kind of reports?
How will you restrict it, sir? How will you restrict it in the age of the internet? They'll publish it on their website. वो कहीं ना कहीं से तो आ ही जाएगा.
Let me tell you. Indian small court, and they didn't oppose that. Indian small court like 30,000 court, they restricted even the Google to take down the reports.
Okay, so let's imagine.
This has happened only in July.
Okay, let me bring in Asha ji at this point. Asha, the point is that the LIC value, the LIC has taken a knock because of the FPO, for example, getting cancelled. And of course the money is going to go back to those who try to save the FPO. But how can we say that there aren't public interest issues at play which are beyond BJP versus Congress, beyond what you call the cabal that has a certain politics? There are public interest issues at the heart of this conversation, and that's where our energy and our focus must be.
So there, Barkha, I think I think there are I think as far as Indian large corporates go, there is definitely, I agree with Salman actually, that there needs to be a reboot and there needs to be a rehauling of some of the regulations that we have to make sure that we don't have oligarchic forces at play. That said, I just want to make a comment on the debt. Every corporate in the world right now is over leveraged because it has become expensive to borrow the money. All of us who have borrowed money 5 years ago are paying much more in debt servicing right now than what people would be paying if they had not borrowed. But again, this is a waiting game. This is an inflation game right now, and while the inflation is running high, we are going to be paying much more in debt servicing. And I think that's what Adani is doing. He's tightening his seatbelt right now while the inflation numbers stay like this. But just yesterday, as you saw, the Feds in the US slowed down and on their own hawkish behavior. We saw the markets going through the roof yesterday, partly because of this optimism that the inflation may not be, at least in the US economy, the inflation may not, if it changes here, we are looking at changes even in India globally. And Adani's amount that he's paying for debt servicing is likely to go down because of this.
Okay.
And I think he's waiting for that. So number one, that. Number two, I think that as far as regulations go, Indian regulations actually are some of the most onerous in the world. So in that sense, I think it does need to be, even though it needs to be rebooted, I do think that we have very little slack there, very little room for maneuver there.
Okay. Okay, let me just bring in Salman on this point that the Adani group is building assets. That's the argument you've heard from both Asha Motwani and Ashwini Mahajan, and that is a long gestation period. And therefore, when you talk about the debt, you aren't counting or factoring in the kind of business that is being built. The second is a political question. There are those of the BJP supporters who today have asked on social media, will opposition-run states actually look at Adani's investments in their states differently? Or is there a kind of essential political hypocrisy at work here? How would you answer both of those questions, Salman Soos?
Look, I mean, the Adani Group is not the only group in India that is engaged in this kind of business. I mean, a lot of asset creation companies out there. And by the way, even under Manrega, you do asset creation. I know people deride Manrega and poor people a lot. I know we're all concerned about the Adanis of the world. But there's a lot of asset creation going on in India. The question is, how do you, I mean, it's not my problem or your problem or the taxpayer's problem, Barkha, then Mr. Adani cannot match his liabilities to his assets. That is what, these people have a lot of money. They should be able to figure it out. They have access to the best financial resources and talent in the world. That is not our problem. My problem as somebody who cares for the public interest is, if LIC policy holders are going to be left with a burden because of what happens with the Adani Group. Is State Bank of India, by the way, on January 24th, the Hindenburg report came out. On January 25th, the anchor book for this FPO was, who was part of that? SBI Life was part of that. Life Insurance Corporation was a part of that. SBI Employee Fund, Pension Fund people were part of this. After the report came out, who is going to take care of the public interest? We also about Mr. Adani. What about the taxpayer? What about the life insurance?
Yeah, let me take that to Ashwini Mahajan. Let me take that to Ashwini Mahajan. It's a very legitimate question. A great deal of concern over LIC. In fact, the LIC hook, Ashwini ji, is what the opposition has raised. If you can come out of this, you can see the LIC market valuation and how it's been impacted. So we just wanted to show you there, but show you this. But we can come out of this and go to Ashwini Mahajan now. Ashwini ji, LIC. I think that's a very legitimate public interest question. And how should the government be tackling that?
You see, everything goes by the market. Nobody had any clue of what is going to happen with and Hindenburg is going to publish the report. Nobody knew that, and it is not about any other company. It is about Adani only. And therefore, when you pick up, there can be questions on the linkage of this with many people. I'm not talking about only the politicians. It can be linked with even China. It can be linked with the other corporate opponents. There can be, but you see, LIC goes by what is there in the market. So they made a right choice, and they invested in that. Now what do you think? That these stocks are going to remain like this? If anybody knows about the stock markets, these stocks keep on going up and down. The
Yeah.
moment they get some support from the judiciary, the stocks may go up. So the issue is that this stock we should not worry. As Manmohan Singh also said at one point of time, I'm not worried about
The stock markets. Yes, I remember that. Salman, you wanted to interject, then Sanjay Hegde. Salman, brief interjection. Salman Soz, unmute him, please. Unmute him, please. You're muted at your end. You've muted yourself, Salman. Let it not be said that we censored you.
My point
Yes.
is that if the Hindenburg report comes out, where is the board of directors of SBI? Where is the board of directors of LIC? Could they not? I mean, this came on January 24th, and 25th. They behaved as if it's business as usual. And let me please caution you. I know our friend from Swadeshi, Jagran Manch, cares for India. Let me caution you. If we keep going ahead and saying that this will take care of itself, tomorrow maybe the courts can come in and start interfering and saying intervening and saying that and the markets pick up. That will not solve India's long-term problem. There's a corporate governance issue in India. There is great concern about the coziness of some business houses with the government of the day. Those issues will not go away, and they can actually cause huge problems for India in the long run. So please don't take this too lightly.
Okay, I need to start actually wrapping up. I want to go to Sanjay Hegde and then to Basant Maheshwari. Sanjay, go ahead. Sanjay Hegde, yeah.
If after the Hindenburg report came out on the 24th, LIC and SBI go ahead and buy more shares at the FPO price, then it would be what the courts call an outrageous defiance of logic. That's on the administrative law side. On the criminal law side, I can very well see a Prevention of Corruption Act section which says that if you contributed to giving somebody unwarranted gains, then also these officers may be in trouble.
And that's a very different perspective from what Ashwini ji thinks might happen in the courts, where he thinks that repair of the market could in fact revive the stock. Asha, I'll give you the last word. I just want Mr. Maheshwari to come. Sorry, Ashwini ji, you want a brief interjection? Then Basant Maheshwari. I literally have 2 minutes left. Ashwini ji, first you on a brief interjection.
Yeah, actually, as Asha ji has said, that we have a very robust system, legal system, corporate governance system, and it's not without the robust system that we have grown so much. So therefore, saying that we don't have any corporate governance, we don't have any laws, we don't have this, that. So our legal system has put the Indira Gandhi also out of the
But Ashwini ji, I just want to remind everybody that one of the most successful web series is by Hansal Mehta called Scam, and it is based on Harshal Mehta. So these things have happened. We have gone through these times when some of the most powerful people have suddenly not been able to recover. Mr. Maheshwari, if you were Gautam Adani, what would you be focusing on today? And by the way, sorry, ripple effects are being felt. Lord Joe Johnson, he used to be a journalist. He's the brother of former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He's resigned as the director of Elora Capital because that is embroiled in the controversy at the Adani empire. So all I'm trying to say is that I don't think this issue and this controversy is going away. And if the markets respond to perception, what should Mr. Adani be doing to address that perception? Basant Maheshwari.
I mean, it's just a one-line answer. He should get rid of the things that he can get rid of. A cement plant, Ambuja Cement, he can get rid of it. I think in 24 to 48 to 72 hours, there are 2 people waiting to pick it up. That's the hottest cake he can get rid of. But I just want to make one more interesting observation. You can stop Hindenburg from publishing its report in India, but how do you stop Adani's bonds that are traded in Frankfurt? And Adani Green has got a 23% yield to maturity now.
And I'm sorry, I missed mentioning to very important things to Ashwini ji in particular, who said you could have stopped this. The two banks, Citigroup and Credit Suisse, have actually refused. Yeah, have refused to attach sort of credence to the bonds. And Asha, how does an empire deal with that? You can't say politics and cabal to Credit Suisse.
No, you can't. But I just want you to know that, on a separate note, Barkha, I actually think that I'm quite thrilled that the Adani prices are so low right now, and I'm buying Adani. So just so you know, I'm, as an investor, as a plain investor, I'm looking to profit from this.
Okay, so we leave it there. There are many questions. I just think that Parliament is going to be engulfed by this. I think it will be very intriguing to see how the courts respond. If more banks join what Credit Suisse has decided to do, Citi has decided to do, then I think the politics will get transcended. Gautam Adani will have to do something to address these questions. The FPO has been cancelled. I don't think he had an option. That was one step towards addressing that perception. And as Basant Maheshwari said, he needs to address that debt, that highly leveraged sort of perception of his company, where everybody's asking, how did he get the money? Why was this money given to him? So I think that would be a start. In the meantime, we thank you. It's been a great panel, a civil debate, as all debates must be. Learned a lot from all of you and hope to have all of you back, because this story ain't going anywhere. Thank you, Salman, Sanjay, Asha, Basant and Ashwini ji. And thank you to our audience. Take care and see you soon.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.